When my son looked me in the eye and said I wasn't welcome at his Christmas table this year, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or ask for an explanation. I simply nodded, stood up from that polished dining chair I had bought him 2 years ago, and walked out into the cold December night. The air was sharp against my face, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house I had helped him buy, renovate, and furnish. Every wall, every window, every piece of molding had my fingerprints on it, my sacrifices buried in its foundations. Yet somehow, I had become the outsider. As I slid behind the wheel of my old truck, I caught a glimpse of the glowing Christmas lights through their window. My son, Mark Reynolds, had built his life on my back. And now, because of his wife Melissa and her family's high-minded traditions, I was the one deemed unworthy of joining them for a holiday meal. I started the engine, my hand steady on the wheel. I didn't beg for a seat at their table. Instead, I made a silent decision: the mortgage payments I had carried for 5 long years would end. Christmas was cancelled, just not for me. I remember the way Mark's words hung in the air, heavy as bricks, impossible to ignore. "Dad, you're not welcome here for Christmas this year." At first, I thought I had misheard him. The living room was warm, the fire flickering in the stone hearth I'd once paid to have rebuilt, and his kids' laughter echoed faintly from upstairs. Surely, I had misunderstood. Surely, no son would look his father in the eye and cut him out of the most sacred family holiday. But Mark didn't flinch. He kept staring at the polished marble coffee table, the one Melissa had insisted was the only piece refined enough for their living room. I remembered the receipt $2,100 on my credit card. I had signed it without complaint, telling myself it was just one more way to make their lives easier. Now, sitting across from me, Mark's shoulders were drawn tight, as if he were bracing for a blow he knew was coming. His voice was low, almost apologetic. "Melissa's parents are visiting this year. They have their traditions. It's just easier this way." Easier for who? Not for me, certainly. I looked around the room, my eyes scanning every corner. The crown molding, the silk curtains, the hardwood floors, all of it bore my fingerprints. Every inch of this house was tied to the sacrifices I had made. I had refinanced my own home, dipped into my retirement savings, even taken a second mortgage so that Mark and Melissa could enjoy the suburban dream. A dream that had somehow turned into a cage for me. Melissa's laughter drifted in from the kitchen, light and airy, the kind of laugh she saved for when she was entertaining or showing off. The smell of her vanilla candles filled the air, cloying and artificial, as though it were trying to mask something rotten underneath. I cleared my throat. "So, what you're telling me is, your in-laws don't want me here, and you're willing to let that stand?" Mark winced. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" I let out a short laugh, though nothing about it was funny. "I've carried you for 5 years, Mark. Paid for this house. Kept you afloat. And now I'm too much of an inconvenience for your dinner table?" He wouldn't look at me. His wedding band caught the firelight, gleaming like a reminder of the chain that tied him to Melissa's every command. Through the archway, I spotted the latest toy she had convinced him they needed: a professional-grade KitchenAid mixer. Stainless steel, gleaming, easily worth $1,000. I thought of the peanut butter sandwiches I'd been eating to keep their mortgage paid, and bile rose in my throat. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Tell me something, son. Where am I supposed to spend Christmas this year? Alone, while you sit here in the house I bled for?" Mark's face twisted, guilt flashing across it like a storm cloud. "Maybe you could visit Aunt Linda, or we could celebrate the weekend after." "The weekend after?" My voice cracked with something between fury and heartbreak. As if Christmas is just another date on a calendar that can be moved around to suit Melissa's parents' comfort. He had no answer. I stood up, slow and deliberate, my knees aching from years of hard work that had built the life he was now so eager to forget. I could feel the weight of family photos staring down at me from the wall, photos where I seemed to fade further into the background with each passing year. Mark finally looked at me, eyes wide, pleading. "Dad, don't walk out like this. Please." I paused at the door, my hand wrapped around the cool metal of the knob. Behind me, I could hear Melissa humming in the kitchen, completely unbothered. She had won, and she knew it. I turned my head just enough to look at my son over my shoulder. "You tell Melissa's parents something for me, Mark." He blinked. "What?" "Feliz Navidad." And with that, I stepped outside into the biting December air. The cold hit me like a slap, but I welcomed it. At least it was honest. I climbed into my truck, shut the door, and sat there in silence for a moment, staring at the Christmas lights twinkling on their porch. Lights I had paid for, just like everything else. The phone buzzed in my pocket, Mark's name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key, letting the engine rumble to life. As I pulled away, I felt the first spark of something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. For too long, I had been their safety net, their silent benefactor, their invisible servant. That ended tonight. They thought they could erase me from their Christmas. They had no idea what was coming. The road stretched out in front of me like a ribbon of cold asphalt, glistening under the pale glow of Sacramento's winter streetlights. My truck rattled against the wind, a sound I usually hated but tonight found oddly comforting. At least it was mine. Paid off with my sweat, not anyone else's. Unlike the house I had just left behind, where my money had built a palace I wasn't welcome to step inside on Christmas. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as memories rolled through my mind, one after another like a cruel slideshow. Mark as a boy, sitting cross-legged in front of the tree, tearing open presents with eyes full of wonder. Me and Sophia. God, how I missed her sitting on the couch, laughing at his joy. Those were the years when family meant something, before Melissa and her parents had turned holidays into performances staged for status and appearances. At a red light on Maple Avenue, I caught sight of a young father loading wrapped gifts into the back of an SUV. His kids pressed their little faces against the frosty glass, fogging it up with giggles and squeals. For just a moment, I saw Mark's face there again, 5 years old, tugging on my sleeve, begging me to hurry so we could open presents. That boy had grown into a man who now treated me like an embarrassment, a burden. The light turned green, and I pressed the accelerator harder than I needed to, my truck growling like it shared my anger. Numbers began flashing in my head, not happy memories but hard figures, totals I had ignored for too long. $3,000 every month. Month after month. 5 years straight. I didn't even need to do the math, it was burned into my brain, $180,000. More than Sophia and I had ever saved for retirement. More than I could ever hope to rebuild at my age. Gone. Poured into Mark's so-called dream life, all while I ate canned soup and wore out the same pair of boots for 6 winters in a row. I turned onto Jefferson Avenue, passing the familiar brick facade of the bank where I'd taken out the second mortgage. I could still hear the loan officer's cautious tone echoing in my ears. "Mr. Reynolds, are you sure about this? You're putting an awful lot on the line for someone else's house." Someone else's house. Not my house. Not my future. Someone else's. At the time, I had brushed it off with a smile. "It's for my son," I'd said proudly. "He just needs a fresh start." But the truth was, I had been a fool. The heater wheezed against the cold as I pulled into my own driveway. My house looked tired, the porch light flickering, paint peeling from the siding, cracks splitting the concrete. Repairs I'd put off because every dime had gone to keep Mark and Melissa comfortable. Their hardwood floors gleamed, their curtains silk, their cabinets stocked with imported wine. And here I was, stepping into a home that felt like a shell, stripped of joy since Sophia passed. The phone buzzed again. Mark. Then Melissa. I didn't answer. Let them wonder. Let them sit in that pristine house and realize the gravity of what they'd just done. Inside, the silence was deafening. The ticking clock in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of old floorboards beneath my boots. This was my reality. Alone. Used up. Forgotten. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands trembling as I lifted it. Not from weakness, but from a rage that had simmered for years and now threatened to boil over. I stared at the chipped countertop, remembering the thousands I had shelled out for Melissa's granite counters because laminate was beneath her. The hypocrisy tasted bitter in my mouth. That was when the phone rang again, Claudia Snow, Melissa's name flashing across the screen. I almost laughed. The timing was perfect. Less than an hour after cutting me from their holiday, she was already calling. Probably to explain it away, to smooth things over just enough to keep the money flowing. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. I wanted her to wonder if I would answer. "Edward," she cooed, her voice syrupy sweet, the kind of sweetness that rots teeth. "I heard about the little misunderstanding with Mark." "Misunderstanding?" I said, my voice flat. "Yes," she went on, breezy as ever. "It's not personal, you know. My parents have very high standards. They expect a certain atmosphere at the holidays. You understand, don't you?" My jaw tightened. "What kind of atmosphere would that be?" She hesitated, then chuckled softly. "Well, let's be honest, Edward. They're educated people. They appreciate art, literature, politics. You don't exactly fit into those conversations." Her words landed like acid, corroding years of patience I'd forced myself to keep. I thought of all the Sunday meals she had eaten at my table when she and Mark couldn't afford groceries. The tamales she swore reminded her of her grandmother. The tacos she begged me to make because nobody cooks like you, Dad. "Funny," I said evenly. "You didn't seem to mind my food when times were tight." She scoffed. "That was different. We appreciated it then, but with my parents, well, you'd only embarrass yourself." No, I thought. Not embarrass myself. Embarrass her. I felt my grip on the phone tighten until my knuckles whitened. "Melissa," I said, my voice low and steady, "let me make something very clear. This conversation is over. And so is the arrangement." "What arrangement?" she asked, suddenly sharper. "The one where I pay for your life." I hung up before she could respond. The silence that followed felt different this time. Lighter. Cleaner. Like the first breath of air after stepping out of a smoke-filled room. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how to keep them afloat. I was thinking about myself. And the decision had already been made, the mortgage payment stopped here. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Melissa's voice echoed in my head. "They're educated people, you'd only embarrass yourself." I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every sacrifice I had made over the years. The down payment I had pulled from my own home equity. The 5 years of monthly mortgage transfers. The furniture, the landscaping, the endless little emergencies that drained my savings dry. I thought about Sophia, too. What would she say if she were here? I pictured her shaking her head, her gentle voice reminding me that I had done more than enough. That our retirement dreams had been sold off piece by piece to keep our son comfortable. That she never wanted me to become a servant in my own family. By morning, the decision was solid as stone. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of bitter coffee store brand, because that's all I'd allowed myself for years, and pulled out the manila folder I had avoided for too long. Inside was a paper trail of my own mistakes, bank statements, mortgage documents, receipts. I spread them out across the table like evidence in a courtroom. Each page told the same story. Year 1, $36,000 gone. Year 2, another $36,000. Year 3, I stopped buying new clothes. Year 4, I shopped at discount grocery stores. Year 5, peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. By the time I reached the final statement, the total burned into my brain, $180,000. $250,000, if you added the down payment, the renovations, the utilities, and the emergency repairs. All of it poured into a house where I wasn't even welcome for Christmas. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Mark's number for a long moment, but no. He would only beg, maybe cry, maybe promise to talk to Melissa's parents. It was too late for that. Instead, I scrolled down to the bank's number and pressed call. A polite automated voice greeted me, offering options in English and Spanish. I jabbed at the keypad, my hand steadier than I expected. Customer service, this is Amanda. How may I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said. My voice didn't even shake. Certainly, sir. May I have your account number? I rattled it off from memory, the numbers etched into my brain from years of writing checks I could barely afford. One moment, I heard the click of her keyboard. Yes, I see it here. $3,000 monthly transfer to Bank of America, account ending in 7423. Looks like you've been making this payment for 5 years. Her tone was neutral, but the number stung. 5 years. That's correct, I said. And you'd like to cancel effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen. The outdated stove. The peeling paint. The draft slipping through the windows I could never afford to replace. All because every spare dollar had gone to prop up Mark and Melissa's lifestyle. Yes, I said firmly. Effective immediately. Done. The transfer has been cancelled. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? I almost laughed. Anything else? She had just handed me back my life. No, I said. That's all. When the call ended, the silence in the room felt different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the silence of being excluded or forgotten. It was freedom. I gathered the stack of statements, the receipts, the evidence of 5 wasted years, and carried them to the fireplace. I struck a match and fed the flames. The paper curled and blackened, numbers disappearing into ash. $180,000 reduced to smoke. Gone, but gone on my terms this time. The heat on my face felt better than anything I had felt in years. I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey I had been saving for some special occasion that never came. I raised it toward Sophia's photo on the mantel. To us, I whispered. And to the man I should have been all along. The whiskey burned warm down my throat, but it didn't burn as much as the truth had burned me for years. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mark. Then Melissa. Then Mark again. I let it ring. For once, I wasn't the one answering their calls. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet wash over me. Outside, Christmas lights glowed in my neighbors' windows. Families gathered without judgment, without conditions. I wasn't part of Mark's Christmas anymore. But for the first time in years, I felt like I might have a Christmas of my own. And this time, it would be on my terms. The next morning, the calls started before sunrise. First Mark, then Melissa, then an unfamiliar number I suspected belonged to her parents. My voicemail filled with their voices, layered with panic, guilt, and thinly veiled rage. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk. Edward, this is ridiculous. You can't just. Mr. Reynolds, this is Richard Morgan. I expect you to return my call immediately. This behavior is unacceptable. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the good kind, Colombian roast I hadn't bought in years because every grocery dollar had been funneled into their so-called necessities. I sipped it slowly, savoring the rich taste, the way it coated my tongue. It wasn't just coffee. It was freedom. By noon, Melissa herself showed up at my front door. She didn't knock politely, she pounded like a debt collector. When I finally opened the door, she was standing there in a fur-trimmed coat, makeup immaculate, her face twisted with fury. "You think this is funny?" she hissed, brushing past me into the living room without waiting for permission. "You cancelled the mortgage transfer. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I closed the door behind her, calm as still water. "Yes. I stopped paying for a house I don't live in. That's exactly what I've done." Her eyes narrowed, glittering with disdain. "You can't just stop. The bank. The bank will contact you now," I interrupted. "Not me. It's your mortgage, Melissa. Not mine. I was just stupid enough to carry it for 5 years." Her jaw dropped at the word stupid. "How dare you? After everything we've allowed you to be part of." "Allowed me?" My voice cut like a knife. "You uninvited me from Christmas. You humiliated me in front of my son. You told me I'd embarrass your family. And now you have the audacity to stand here in my house and demand more of my money." She faltered, but only for a moment. "You're being dramatic. This isn't about exclusion. This is about stability. My parents are visiting, and they expect certain standards. Do you really want them to see us struggling? It reflects on all of us." I laughed then, a sound raw and sharp. "No, Melissa. It reflects on you. And it's about time the world saw you as you really are." Her mask cracked. "Mark will never forgive you for this. You're destroying his life. Mark destroyed it himself the moment he let you convince him that money mattered more than family." Her nostrils flared. For the first time, I saw something new in her eyes, not just anger, but fear. Real, genuine fear. The kind that creeps in when entitlement collides with reality. She gathered her coat around her shoulders and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this, Edward. You'll regret crossing me." I opened the door for her, holding it wide. "Get out of my house." The door slammed behind her with a satisfying thud. I stood there for a long time, breathing deeply, letting the silence settle over me like a blanket. For years, my home had been filled with their demands, their expectations, their voices dripping with manipulation. Now, it was quiet. Truly quiet. That evening, I went through the rest of my financial files. Every canceled check, every bill I'd covered, every receipt. I boxed them neatly, a record of my foolishness, but also proof. Proof of just how much I had given, and how little I had been valued in return. When the phone rang again, I didn't even glance at the screen. I unplugged the landline from the wall, powered down my cell, and dropped both into the drawer of my desk. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to anyone else's emergencies. No sudden calls demanding help with a bill. No desperate pleas for, just one more month. That night, I cooked myself a grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of tomato soup. Simple food, humble food, but it was mine. Every bite tasted like liberation. As I ate, I thought of Sophia again. How she used to say, "Love means sacrifice, but it also means respect." I had given plenty of the first. It was about time I demanded the second. When I finished, I poured another glass of whiskey, stood on the porch, and looked out at the quiet street. Christmas lights blinked on my neighbors' houses, kids played in the cold air, and for once, I didn't feel bitter watching them. Because I knew something they didn't, I had finally cut the cord. And the ripple effect of that choice was only just beginning. 2 days passed before the storm finally hit my doorstep. By then, I had almost grown used to the silence. No buzzing phone. No frantic texts. No demands about broken appliances or late bills. Just peace. I fixed myself decent meals, read the newspaper with my morning coffee, even slept through the night for the first time in months. But peace never lasts when people like Melissa feel their control slipping. It started with a flurry of not knocks. Pounding. Heavy, angry fists against my front door that rattled the frame. I set my coffee down, already knowing who it was. When I opened the door, 3 figures crowded my porch like storm clouds. Richard Morgan, Melissa's father, stood in front, his face red with fury, veins bulging at his temples. His wife, Eleanor, hovered just behind him, her lips pursed into a hard, judgmental line. And of course, there was Melissa herself, arms crossed, eyes flashing with triumph disguised as indignation. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Richard barked, pushing past me into my living room as though he owned it. "We waited at that airport for hours. Hours. You humiliated us." Eleanor followed, her heels clicking against my worn hardwood floors. She wrinkled her nose, scanning my modest home with thinly veiled disgust. "This is disgraceful, Edward. Completely barbaric behavior from a man of your age." Melissa swept in last, her coat wrinkled, her makeup smudged, fury radiating off her like heat off asphalt. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a taxi." "A taxi, Edward. Do you understand how humiliating that was?" I closed the door behind them, leaning against it, my arms folded. "Get out of my house." Richard whirled on me, finger jabbing the air. "Don't you dare. You don't get to order us around after the stunt you pulled." "This is my home," I said evenly, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "And you're not welcome here." Eleanor stepped forward, chin high. "Victor," she caught herself, correcting, "Edward, you clearly don't understand the consequences of your behavior. My husband has connections. Business ties. Social ties. You can't treat people of our standing this way and expect to get away with it." I stared at her, unmoving. "This isn't about connections. It's about respect. Something none of you seem to understand." Melissa's jaw dropped. "Respect? You think this is about respect? You've embarrassed me in front of everyone I know. You made my parents stand in baggage claim like peasants." The word stung. Not because of what it meant, but because of the way she spit it out. "This was a lesson," I said, my tone low and deliberate. "A lesson about arrogance. About entitlement. About what happens when you bleed someone dry and still expect them to bow." Richard laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it. "A lesson? Who do you think you are, old man? You're nobody. I'm the man who finally stopped being your bank account," I cut in. "Your chauffeur. Your servant. I'm the man who decided enough was enough." The room went still. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, sharp as knives. "You'll regret this, Edward. People talk. Stories spread. You think anyone will believe your side over ours?" Melissa crossed her arms tighter. "Dad's right. You've made powerful enemies. You'll never win this." I stepped aside and opened the door wide, gesturing toward the cold December evening waiting outside. "Then go. Go spread your stories. Spin your lies. But you do it out there. Not in here." For a moment, none of them moved. Richard's face darkened from red to purple, his chest heaving. Eleanor looked ready to spit venom. Melissa glared at me with the kind of fury that could peel paint off the walls. Finally, Richard jabbed a finger toward my chest, stopping just short of touching me. His voice dropped to a growl. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Reynolds. I've been in this town longer than you've been breathing. I have important people who can make your life miserable. Is that a threat, Mr. Morgan?" I asked quietly. His eyes narrowed. "No. That's a promise." Eleanor's smile was cold as glass. "Choices carry consequences, Edward. And yours will be very public." Melissa tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, forget it. He's pathetic. Not worth our time." But even as they filed out of my house like retreating soldiers, Richard turned at the door, his glare burning through me. You'll regret this. Count on it. I locked the door behind them with a final, satisfying click. Through the curtain, I watched them climb into their rental car, still bickering, still seething, still convinced their influence could crush me. The house felt lighter without them, as though their presence had left a film on the air that was only now dissipating. But their words lingered. Connections. Consequences. Very public. I sipped my coffee again, the taste gone bitter, and sat down heavily in my chair. For the first time, a flicker of unease stirred in my chest. They weren't bluffing. People like Richard and Eleanor didn't throw around words like that idly. But the unease was quickly drowned by something sharper. Anticipation. Because if they wanted a war, I was ready to fight. 3 days after that confrontation, I opened my morning paper and nearly dropped my coffee. There I was, staring back from page 4 of the Sacramento Chronicle. A grainy black and white photo, at least 5 years out of date, lifted from my old company website. Above it, the headline blared. Local businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm. Holiday storm. My jaw tightened. The temperature that day had been 55 degrees and sunny. But according to the article, Richard and Eleanor Morgan, Melissa's proud, polished parents had endured hazardous weather conditions after I supposedly failed to pick them up for a prearranged ride. I read the piece once, then again, slower this time. Every line dripped with manipulation. We called him over and over, Richard was quoted. But Mr. Reynolds ignored us. At our age, being stranded like that isn't just inconsiderate. It's dangerous. The writer, Linda Harper, painted me as a bitter old man who had snapped without warning. A man with erratic behavior and a history of family conflict. Not one mention of the years of mortgage payments. Not one line about the sacrifices. Not a whisper of Melissa's snide remarks or their Christmas rejection. Just meth villain. I set the paper down, my hands trembling. Not with fear. With fury. For years, I had been invisible, a man in the background holding up their world with my money. Now, suddenly, I was front and center but as their scapegoat. Their lies were being printed, circulated, consumed like gospel truth by strangers who would never know the real story. I forced myself to breathe slowly, deliberately. I knew this move. I had seen it before in business. When someone is cornered, they go public. They paint themselves as victims before the other side can speak. It was clever, I had to admit. Richard hadn't just thrown a tantrum, he'd played a calculated hand. But he had made a mistake. By going public, he'd given me permission to go public, too. I pushed the paper aside and opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keys, searching names, pulling up profiles, gathering threads. Richard Morgan, retired bank manager, treasurer of the Pacific Coast Entrepreneurs Network, longtime member of the Evergreen Country Club. A man who had built his identity on trust and reputation. A man with plenty to lose. Eleanor Morgan, her Instagram was a gallery of carefully staged perfection. Charity luncheons, wine tastings, glossy vacation photos. Blessed life captioned under pictures of Lake Tahoe sunsets, pearls glinting on her neck. A performance for the world, but now I saw it for what it was, leverage. And Melissa. Her Facebook was practically a confession booth. Posts bragging about our beautiful home with the granite counters I had paid for shining in the background. Photos of expensive dinners at restaurants during months when I had covered their utilities. A status update from just last week, so excited to host Christmas dinner. Can't wait to show off our home and our hosting skills. Hosting skills. With whose money? But the final thread tied everything together. Mark's LinkedIn. A new connection added only days before, Linda Harper, the Chronicle lifestyle editor. The very woman who had written the smear piece. There it was. The smoking gun. I leaned back in my chair, the anger in my chest settling into something colder, sharper. This wasn't just about a holiday dinner anymore. This was a chessboard, and they'd made their opening move. I wasn't some washed-up fool they could paint into a corner. I was a builder. A fighter. A man who had clawed his way up from nothing once before, and I still had fight left in me. So I started to build again this time, not a business, but a case. I pulled out the thick folder of records I'd kept. Bank statements highlighted in yellow. Mortgage transfers. Canceled checks. Receipts for every renovation, every emergency expense, every dollar I had poured into that house. I stacked them neatly, then opened a new document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, the truth about the Morgans. Line by line, I began to construct the timeline. $50,000 for the down payment, pulled from my home equity. $20,000 on the granite counters Melissa just had to have. $180,000 in mortgage payments, $3,000 a month for 5 years. Utilities, furniture, landscaping, tens of thousands more. $250,000. All of it documented. All of it mine. And tucked at the bottom of the stack was the Chronicle article, covered in my red pen notes. False. Omission. Manipulation. A map of lies, dismantled line by line. I looked at the wall calendar. December 24th circled in bold black marker. Not because of Christmas, not anymore. Because that was the night of their big dinner party. The night Melissa planned to parade her home in front of neighbors and friends. Perfect. They had chosen the battlefield. But they hadn't realized I was coming prepared. Christmas Eve arrived cold and gray, but my blood was steady, almost calm. I had spent the last 3 days gathering every piece of evidence, every receipt, every transfer slip that proved exactly what I had endured. They had called me unstable. They had called me a liar. Tonight, I would show them the truth. On my kitchen table, the stacks of paper looked like weapons, 5 years of bank statements, mortgage documents, photographs from Melissa's own social media flaunting jewelry and vacations bought with my money. I had made 14 identical packets, one for each guest expected at their dinner party. On top of every packet, I placed the Chronicle article, my red notes scrawled in the margins, false, omission, manipulation. At 6:45, I put on my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to Sophia's funeral. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted them to see the man they had dismissed. I wanted them to look me in the eye and realize I was no one's servant. By 7, I was parked across the street from their glowing suburban palace. Cars jammed the driveway and lined the curb. Through the frosted windows, I saw silhouettes gathered around the table, glasses raised, laughter spilling into the night. Melissa's voice carried even through the glass, loud, triumphant, the hostess playing queen in a kingdom I had built. I tightened my grip on the briefcase in my hand, stepped out of my truck, and walked across the icy street. The front door, as I expected, was unlocked. Melissa always boasted about how safe their neighborhood was. I stepped inside. Warmth and candlelight hit me, along with the sharp scent of roasted turkey and expensive wine. The dining room was alive with chatter until I walked in. 14 heads turned at once. Conversations froze. Claudia Snow, Melissa's glass stopped halfway to her lips. Mark went pale. Richard and Eleanor looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm. I set my briefcase on the marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind if I join you for Christmas." The silence was broken by Melissa's shriek. "Edward. This is completely inappropriate. You need to leave right now." "Actually," I said, opening my case and pulling out the first stack of papers, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this celebration. This house. This dinner. This lifestyle you're so proud to show off." I began moving around the table, placing a packet in front of each stunned guest. "Here you'll find 5 years of bank statements. $180,000 in mortgage payments. Plus the down payment, the renovations, the furniture, the appliances. All of it from me. All of it unacknowledged. All while being told I wasn't welcome at this table. Murmurs rippled through the room as papers rustled. Faces shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to outrage. A woman in pearls leaned closer to the numbers, her brows knitting. This can't be right. Melissa snapped, her voice shrill. He's having some kind of episode. Mark, call someone. But I wasn't finished. I slid the Chronicle article onto the table next. And while you're digesting that, let's discuss this little masterpiece. I tapped the headline with one finger. The story Richard planted to smear me. According to him, I abandoned two poor helpless seniors in a winter storm. I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. The temperature that day was 55 degrees and sunny. They weren't stranded tourists. They were Melissa's parents, headed to a Christmas dinner I had been forbidden to attend because I was embarrassing. Gasps broke out. One man shook his head, glaring at Richard. Is this true? Richard opened his mouth, but I cut him off. And let's not forget the words your daughter-in-law used. That I'd embarrass you with my Mexican cooking. That my conversations weren't refined enough for your table. That I was beneath you. Eleanor's face drained of color. That's not. Not what? Not what you meant. Not what you whispered when you thought I wouldn't hear. I've got screenshots from Melissa's posts right here. I held up my phone, scrolling to the photos, their lavish vacations, the caption bragging about hosting dinner in our beautiful home, every single indulgence paid for with my sacrifices. The room turned colder than the December air outside. Neighbors exchanged looks, charity friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One older woman slammed her packet shut. Richard, Eleanor, how could you? How could you let this man bankroll your family, then destroy his reputation in the paper when he finally said no? Melissa's perfect hostess mask cracked, fury twisting her features. This is a private matter. He has no right to air this in front of all of you. No, I said firmly, my voice carrying through the room. This stopped being private when you dragged me through the newspaper. You wanted to make me a villain. Fine. But tonight, your friends hear the truth before they hear another one of your lies. I snapped my briefcase shut and straightened my tie. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll ever pay for. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the room erupted, voices rising, questions firing, accusations flying. Richard tried to shout over them, his face purple with rage. Eleanor muttered excuses, her words drowned in the storm of disbelief. Melissa begged for order, but no one listened. Mark sat frozen, pale and speechless, caught between the parents he married into and the father he had betrayed. His eyes flicked to me, full of shame he couldn't put into words. I walked out as the chaos behind me swelled into the sweetest Christmas music I'd ever heard. The night air bit at my cheeks, but it felt clean, fresh, alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't burdened by their weight. I was free. When I slid into my truck and started the engine, I glanced back at the glowing windows of the house. Their perfect facade was cracking, collapsing under the truth. Merry Christmas, I thought. Justice delivered. By the time March rolled around, the storm they tried to unleash on me had blown back full force on them. It came in the form of a letter, delivered by certified mail. I signed for it on my porch, the spring air cool but gentle, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Inside the envelope was a notice of default. 3 months of missed mortgage payments. $9,000 past due. 14 days to fix it or face foreclosure. I set the letter on my kitchen table, right next to my morning coffee, and read it like it was the weather report from another state. Interesting, but not my problem anymore. My phone had been buzzing for weeks, calls, voicemails, desperate texts. Melissa, alternating between shrieking fury and syrupy apologies. Richard and Eleanor, their voices suddenly stripped of authority now that their reputation in Sacramento had shattered after Christmas Eve. And Mark, my son, his calls I ignored the longest. Half out of anger. Half because I wanted to see how long it would take him to choke down his pride. The answer was 100 days. It was a Thursday evening when I heard the knock. Slow, hesitant. Not the furious pounding Melissa favored. I opened the door to find Mark standing there, not the polished man in tailored suits he once was, but a hollowed-out version of himself. His eyes were ringed with dark circles. His suit was wrinkled, his shoulders slumped. Desperation clung to him like cheap cologne. "Dad," he said softly. "We need to talk." I stepped aside. He entered slowly, looking around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new recliner I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck. The freshly painted walls. The repaired porch light that no longer flickered. The small but steady improvements I'd finally been able to make once I stopped bleeding myself dry for him and Melissa. "Nice place," he muttered. "That's what happens," I replied, settling into my chair, "when you spend your money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it." He sank onto the edge of the couch like a guest who wasn't sure he belonged. His hands twisted together in his lap. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am. For Christmas. For the article. For the way Melissa and I treated you." "Go on," I said. His voice cracked as he continued. "I didn't know Richard had planted that story. I swear. When I found out, Jesus, Dad, the things they said about you. The way they talked about our family. About Mom. My jaw tightened, but my voice stayed even. What did they say about your mother?" He dropped his head into his hands. "That she knew her place better than you. That she didn't make trouble. That she understood boundaries." His shoulders shook. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." Silence stretched between us. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower hummed, the sound of an ordinary spring evening in an ordinary neighborhood. Finally, Mark spoke again. "The house is in foreclosure. We can't make the payments without—" He stopped himself, swallowing hard. "Without my help," I finished. He nodded miserably. "I know how it looks. Do you know how much I gave you over those years?" I asked. His eyes lifted to mine. 200,000. Melissa added it up after Christmas. 250,000, I corrected. I know the exact number because I finally forced myself to do what I should have done years ago, add it all up. His face crumpled. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said. "The money is gone. But worse than that, the years are gone. Years we could have spent building a relationship. Instead, I was underwriting your wife's fantasy." "I know," he whispered. Then, after a pause, "But maybe we could start over. Find a way back." "Are you asking me to resume the payments?" I asked bluntly. The hope drained from his face. "We're going to lose everything, Dad. The house, Melissa's respect, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do." "You'll figure it out," I said. Not cruel. Just honest. The way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you laughed with people who thought I was beneath them. Tears welled in his eyes, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, like a man who had finally run out of choices. "I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever." I studied him for a long moment. This was my son. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed for, the man who had let his wife's family convince him that his father was unworthy. "No, Mark," I said at last. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference." His tears spilled, but he nodded slowly, as if the truth itself was a punishment he deserved. Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It isn't resuming the payments. It isn't going back to scraps of attention at someone else's table. Then what does it mean? He whispered. I stood and walked to the mantel. Sophia's photo smiled back at me, and beside it, a new picture, me at Easter with Rosa and her family, the first holiday I'd spent with people who truly wanted me there. It means if you want a relationship with me, you start from the ground up. It means showing me respect, not demanding I earn it. It means making choices because they're right, not because they're easy. And it means the next time your wife or anyone tries to push me out of family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. Mark wiped his face, his breathing uneven, but something shifted in his eyes. A realization. Maybe even growth. The house? He asked quietly. Isn't my problem anymore, I said, sitting back down. You're a grown man. Time to start acting like one. Find work that pays your bills. Sell the house if you have to. Buy something you can afford. Stop expecting other people to bankroll your mistakes. He stood slowly, his posture straighter than when he arrived. For the first time in a long time, he looked less like a boy begging for rescue and more like a man facing consequences. You're right, he said quietly. About all of it. I know. At the door, he paused. His voice was low, almost reverent. Dad, for what it's worth, when you stood up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud. Embarrassed and furious, sure. But proud, too. Good, I said. Maybe there's still hope for you. After he left, I poured myself a glass of good whiskey and stepped out onto the back porch. The spring air was warm, buds sprouting on the trees, a season of new beginnings. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their school projects. I smiled as I typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Because I finally understood, real family isn't bound by blood or last names. It's the people who want you at their table, not the ones who tolerate you while spending your money. The whiskey burned warm on my tongue. It tasted like freedom. And for the first time in years, the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it.